Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Perfection Unfolding with me, your host, Cara G. This is the podcast where I've decided, where we focus more on being and less on doing. I'm workshopping that a little bit, but if you're new here, welcome. You're in for a treat. This is a space where we are dedicated to holistic self-development, some grounded spirituality. Pretty much, I just like the real stuff. I like the real stuff. I don't like the fluff. Anytime someone comes at me with some kind of like woo-woo answer to a practical question, I get pissed off. So maybe that gives you some context of who I am. I'm a woo-woo girl who's grounded in the real world, trying to live my best human beingness experience. Does that sound good to you? Do you like that? Well, you're in for a treat. Those of you who have been here, thank you so much for your continued listening and your continued support. I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. No one has ever emailed the pod. Every week I ask you to, but it's like nobody has anything they want to talk about. Nobody? Y'all ain't got nothing? Not a single question, not a single, little curiosity floating around up there that you want to chit-chat with me about? Because I really want to hear what you guys are thinking. I mean, did you like the last week's episode about the mini series on inner child work? Because that's what we're getting into today. So if you're here, honestly, if you just kind of stumbled upon me on YouTube, congratulations. We're about to get into some inner child stuff. But if you've been here, tell me what you like. Like, dang, what's a girl gotta do? I'm just gonna start becoming more and more unhinged. Maybe you guys are into that. But even if you're not, I don't think I could change it even if I wanted to. This episode is brought to you by the color pink. If you're watching. I got my color analysis done a couple weeks ago. Found out that I'm officially a true winter. Got rid of every article of clothing in my closet that does not align with that palette, and I've never felt more alive. I've never felt more seen. And honestly, it's giving brand. It's giving personal brand. It's giving, I look amazing in this color. If you know me, you know I'm a purple girly. I'm a purple, pink, fuchsia, magenta. Hell, I bought a bunch of cobalt blues recently, and I'm about to rock the shit out of that this winter. Got some blue turtlenecks. It's gonna make my eyes look like I'm coming for you. Anyway, that's enough of that. Welcome. Today is part 2 of inner child work, and we're gonna get into. I'm not gonna speed through anything, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. So get ready. I got some articles prepared. It's like an old school season 1 episode up in here today because I wanted to bring you guys some real world, tangible information distilled through the lens of me, Cara J. I hate talking about myself in third person, but you get the point, okay? So last week we talked about what the inner child is, right? And just to recap that, the inner child, I believe, is this the essence of your soul, your personality. It's got all your best bits when it's healthy. It's your creativity, it's your joy. Your your uninhibited childlike self, right? That comes out when you do your hobbies, when you're being creative. It's the best parts of what make us alive, curiosity, creativity, what have you. My top 2 values, might I add. And then it also inhabits, your inner child can also, not inhabit, but oh my God, your inner child can also showcase as the worst parts of yourself, your immaturity, your emotional reactivity. And these traits come out when you're wounded, when your inner child is wounded, right? Its whole goal, your inner child's whole goal is to protect itself if it's got a wound that's been around for a really long time. Whereas your healed inner child is all about play. It's all about expression. Okay, so that's the inner child. Today we're going to get into how the inner child gets wounded, and then also how the wounded inner child shows up in our adult lives, and the signs you can look out for to kind of decide for yourself, is my inner child wounded? In what ways is it wounded? If it is wounded, how does it show up in my own life? Right? We kind of briefly touched on how it shows up in our adult lives, but today we're going to deep dive with signs to look out for, and then maybe some different symptoms of how it shows up in your life. It's going to be really exciting. I really love this topic because if you've never been here before, my belief, my hypothesis and my own lived experience is that healing your inner child, okay, most of us have a wounded inner child of some sort, and we're going to get into kind of like the nuance of what that looks like. But I believe that healing your inner child is like the single thing you can do to sustainably heal yourself. Like when people talk about doing the work, quote unquote, I think doing the work, if you do this work, inner child work, you don't have to do any other work because all your problems, I mean, this is my opinion. This is my opinion. My opinion, okay? I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor, okay? I'm of the opinion that if you do this work, you probably don't have any other work to really do. Unless you're like actively in an abusive relationship, in which case you need to leave. Or try to. Or seek help. Anyway, I digress. So let's get into it. We're going to get into how our inner child gets wounded. Okay. I took notes. Buckle up. Okay. So I did some light Googling. I was going to go into some life updates before we got into this episode, but I'm like, we got too much to cover. I'll catch y'all up eventually. Just know I'm moving in silence. I hate when people say that because it's like, well, you said it, so now it doesn't really. Now you're talking about it. Anyway, moving on. Okay. Topic of the week, inner child work, meeting the inner child, the wound beneath the behavior. Okay. So I found this article on cptsdfoundation.org. For those of you who don't know, CPTSD just stands for complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which when you have CPTSD, it's usually because you had like a bunch of different traumatic events all compounded together, right? Hence the complex in front of it. People like my father, people in the military, people who were physically abused, usually were also emotionally and psychologically abused. So you add all that up, you times it by all the years that it happened, and like, yeah, you're going to have some complex issues, right? You can't just put trauma in a box. If you're lucky, you have like maybe one event that's ever happened to you that you've just been kind of working through. But even depending on what happened in that one event, like you could still have CPTSD or just PTSD. Again, not a doctor. That's something you should discuss with your psychiatrist or your therapist or whoever's allowed to diagnose you. So on cptsdfoundation.org, there's an article called The Wounded Inner Child. And I didn't copy everything from the website, but there's some really good stuff in here that gets into like how the wound happens, like how the child becomes wounded based off different varying events. Last week we talked about how when you're a child, your wounding comes from your parents, but we're going to talk about how, like what your parents had to do to maybe cause this wound, right? Or your caretakers or your providers or whatever. All of it, like all the wounds have to do with, you not feeling safe. Okay, that's the core of how this happens, and we're going to get into what that looks like in the different ways. So it says the wounded inner child, the unsafe messages children receive. In part of the article, it says all children deserve to feel safe from harm, fear, and lack. Lack is a major key. Safety does not mean only physical security, but also emotional and spiritual well-being as well. When children feel safe within the families they were born into, their boundaries are respected and that their needs are met. Oh, sorry. Let me backtrack. When children feel safe within the families they were born into, their boundaries are respected and their needs are met, and this makes them feel secure. Major key. So safety equals security. Who would have thunk? Words, it also goes on to say, words can hurt as severely as actions, with some of the signals given to children leaving deep scars that can last a lifetime. Some of these statements and actions made by parents that leave open wounds are as follows. And then it gives like a long list, and I'm going to read it. So that's a major key. It's like physical trauma, yeah, that's bad, but it's saying emotional trauma can be just as bad, if not worse, depending on what's going on. And there's actually a study, I didn't look it up and put it in my notes right now, but I came across a study via the internet. I follow a lot of doctors and therapists and things that talked about how the effects on your nervous system from emotional trauma were similar to that of physical abuse. So, a lot of us, I feel like, who are my age, 30, plus, or even younger. I mean, this is a common phenomenon, but a lot of our parents and their parents' thought, and have thought, oh, well, I didn't hit my kids, so like they're going to be better off than me. And it's like, honestly, sometimes I wish you would have just hit me because the emotional scarring is so much worse. I'm just kidding. I would never say that physical abuse is okay and or better. However, I'm just trying to make the case that they're both pretty bad. Okay. So some of these actions made by parents leave open wounds, and these are a couple examples. So a couple examples of what causes the wounding, okay, from parents: not allowing a child to have their own opinions. Yeah, it's a lot of people with narcissistic parents. You are just an extension of them, and you are not a whole person. You were supposed to just nod your head and be like their little puppet, right? That's not good. That's going to cause a wound, okay? Discouragement from playing or having fun. Anybody have really serious parents who don't know how to laugh or take a joke or do anything creative or playful? They just are all work, no play. There's all stress, 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 stress. Common occurrence. That's going to cause a wound. You're literally a child. Children are creative beings. If you're not allowed to do that, it's going to be a problem. Another example is you're not allowed to display strong emotions. You ever been called a crybaby before? You ever been told that you're being dramatic? What's that like? Couldn't tell you. You ever told to shut up? You ever told you're being annoying? Can't relate to that one. Yes, I can. Yeah, that's going to cause a wound. When you are not allowed to emotionally express yourself to the fullest capacity, and by expressing your emotions means literally like getting them out of your body. Expressing your emotions isn't just like letting the tears come down. Like, yes, that's a part of it, but an unexpressed emotion, like, it's gonna get stuck in the body, because if it's not expressed, it's not in motion. It's not emotion. It's just stuck, right? That's a different topic for a different day. Talking about emotions getting stuck in the body. I'm going to somatic practitioner school. We will be discussing this later. I can assure you of that. Another example: punishing for speaking up. This goes back into like, if you're not allowed to have strong emotions, if you're being told to sit down and shut up, if you're being gaslit into like not speaking up for something that you think is messed up or feels weird in your body. Because again, we're talking about being children. We don't understand a lot of things, but our bodies tell us when we're in danger, when we're not safe, right? That's how we develop our coping mechanisms from childhood in the first place. Yeah, being punished for speaking up. Like, do you ever have a parent? I'm pulling from real life examples. Whatever. Oh, love you, love mom and dad, love you guys if you're listening. Ha. An example that I have of like being punished for speaking up, and it's a very small example. Like, this could be taken in so many different directions, but like if I had a question in the middle of being yelled at, well, no, you don't. You're supposed to shut up, because if you talk at all, you're being disrespectful. If you have any questions, that's disrespect. And then God forbid I catch an attitude. I mean, Jesus. Now you're asking for it. Another example: you're continuously shamed by caregivers. So this goes into, I mean, just as a woman, I didn't experience this, but I have like close friends whose parents were obsessed with their bodies, particularly their mothers. Moms can't stop talking about, oh, your waistline is a little thick, or you sure you want to wear that? Or even dads who were like, you look fat. Whatever happened to just existing? Whatever happened to that? Could we just circle back to that? That'd be great. Yeah, that's going to cause a wound. You're going to internalize the fact that like you should be ashamed for how you look because you had Doritos, or like, are you going to eat that? You think that's a little much? Yeah, big eating disorder vibes. That's going to cause a wound. And again, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. You're a child. It's because your own parents are projecting their wounds onto you. That's why you're here, is to do the work so we don't do that moving forward, okay? Let's not forget the plot. Another example is not allowing spontaneity. I think this goes hand in hand with like play or having fun. Like you're not allowed to do anything out of the ordinary. You have to be predictable. Your parents have to have to know exactly what you're doing at all times. You're not allowed to change anything about yourself. There's no room for you to be spontaneous. Like everything, it's like a control thing, you know? You're kind of under their thumb. That's going to keep you from being a fully formed person, because what kind of person is doing the same thing all the time forever? Maybe your parents, I don't know. Another example is not giving appropriate hugs, kisses, or cuddles. This is a physical touch wound or a lack thereof. Yeah, like if your parents ever like hugged you or kissed you or showed you any kind of physical affection, you probably internalized that as like something's wrong with you, or you're not worthy of affection, of physical affection of some sort. It's going to cause a wound. And the last example it gives is that something that causes a wound is children who do not receive emotional and physical support. They grow up to be hurting adults. Yeah, I mean, classic. If your parents weren't there for you emotionally because A, either didn't have the capacity, or B, hated themselves and so therefore hated you and like found you disgusting and to be a burden, yeah, it's going to cause a wound. Who could have guessed that, you know? So those are just some examples of how the wounding occurs. Because I think a lot of the articles I came across were talking about how to heal the inner child. It's like, here's the steps to do it. But I feel like so many of us, when we hear like the word childhood trauma or like the phrase childhood trauma, we think, oh, somebody who was starved, somebody who was molested, somebody who was poor, somebody who was beat, right? But the thing about being a smushy, gushy little child with a brain that's not fully developed is that the smallest things could cause this deep hurt, right? Which the language we're using to call that is a wound, right? And what is a wound but a trauma that happens, right? When you scrape your knee, you got trauma to your knee. There's varying degrees of trauma. It's a spectrum like anything else, but all of them need tending to. You know, like you wouldn't just let your knee keep bleeding out even if it was just a scratch. No, you would wash the wound, you would put some Neosporin on it or something. I'm not a nurse, okay, I'm not medical advice, but and then you would put a band-aid on it. And when I'm using band-aid, I mean like a physical band-aid in this analogy. I'm not saying put a band-aid on it like a temporary fix, right? But you would do the thing to tend to the wound, and then you would let time heal, right? But you're taking proactive action, right? Maybe once the wound closes up, you put oil on it every day to make sure it doesn't scar, right? That's a trauma. It's just a small trauma. Like that's not the same as breaking your leg. If you break your leg, you got to go to the hospital. You have to get a cast. You have to wait 6 weeks or whatever. You have to hobble around with some crutches. There's way more tools involved with healing that broken leg, which I'm loving this analogy because like tools is like the best way to describe like what you need for your mental health, right? You need tools, right? The bigger the trauma, the more complex the trauma or the wound, the more complex the tools you need to help you heal that wound, right? So a lot of these articles talk about healing the wound, but they don't talk about where it comes from. So if you're like me, you know, if I had just encountered this term inner child work or whatever, I'd be like, or like this wounded child comes from trauma. 5 years ago, I would have been like, well, my childhood was pretty good. Like, yeah, my dad yelled at me like in a kind of obnoxious way when I was a child, but like everything else is still pretty good. But now that I'm older, like I understand the nuance of all the things that happened and like the fact that I was a child and like even if somebody talked to me like that as an adult, it would hurt my feelings, you know? But at least as an adult, I have a sense of self. But when you're so small and so young, you have no sense of self. You have no sense of nuance. You have no sense of context. And you have no sense of the fact that like the world is happening with or without you. Like you think that all the problems that happen to you, that happen around you are your fault because you have this like egocentric reality until you're like, you know, 11 or 12 and you start looking outside yourself for like, oh, maybe people do exist outside of me, you know. Anyway, I digress. Moving on. So the article goes on to talk about the 3 common ways children are made to feel unsafe. So trauma happens when children feel unsafe. And these are like the 3 ways in which that happens. Um, there's physical neglect, emotional neglect, and psychological neglect. It says for physical neglect, physical safety and nourishment are basic human needs that are to be given freely from caregivers to children. However, in physical neglect, these rights are violated and are lacking. Unfortunately, physical neglect does not mean only that the child was kept from food and shelter. It also means several forms of abuse are taking place, such as sexual abuse. So, yes, this is something that, like, physical neglect is you're being starved, your physical need, your basic physical needs aren't being met by, like, you are homeless. But then also physical neglect, like it said, it could also be sexual abuse where your bodily autonomy is being stripped from you by this person in your life. It's a very real thing that happens more often than I'd like. More often, I wish that it wasn't happening at all, but it's a very real reality. So if you've ever experienced anything of that nature, my guess is that you might have a wound. Your inner child might have a wound. And it goes on to say that that wound might show up as low self-esteem. It might show up as eating disorders. It might show up as self-harm, addictions, violent behavior, and sexual dysfunction. The correlating theme with all of these things, minus the low self-esteem, is that there's a physical piece to it. Now, obviously, coping mechanisms, there can be cross pollination in terms of, like, low self-esteem could happen when you're even emotionally neglected or psychologically neglected. But eating disorders is abuse of the body. It's also a control mechanism because if you had no control over when your next meal was going to come from or where your shelter was, you're going to use food as, like, okay, I can control this, right? This is something that I have. Like, my whole environment is chaotic, but, like, this is a physical thing that I can keep tabs on, right? I didn't know I had disordered eating my entire life. I'm a binge and restrictor for a long time. I was a binge and restrictor for a long time. I had no clue that that was an eating disorder. I was like, well, I'm not vomiting. I'm not bulimic, so I must be healthy. It must be great. No, no. Binge and restrict has, like, everything to do with, like it wasn't a control thing for me. It was just like I would just emotionally eat. I would eat when I was happy. I would eat when I was sad. But I wouldn't just eat like regular. I would eat till I felt sick. But instead of throwing it up, I would just sit in that sick feeling. I'd feel miserable, like my stomach was going to explode. Yeah, not healthy. And guess what? I may or may not have. I definitely experienced a smidgen of sexual abuse when I was younger. Well, it was not by my parents, but interesting correlation. Coincidence? I think not. Right? Self-harm is that's a physical thing. Interesting. Addiction, a physical coping mechanism. Violent behavior, a physical coping mechanism. Sexual dysfunction, a physical coping mechanism. Physical neglect, interesting, that's a correlation with physical coping. I don't think there's a coincidence here. The second, what do they call it? The second way that children are made to feel unsafe is emotional neglect. It says in this type of neglect, a child's caregiver did not show enough interest in the child's emotional needs for support, respect, and love. In these cases, either the caregiver does not pay attention to or condemns any emotional expressions that the child might need. It's like, okay, your parent gave you physical safety, but emotional neglect. Like, they didn't, like, either that showed up like they didn't listen to you when you spoke, they dismissed you, they called you a crybaby, they had no capacity to hold you having any kind of experience other than happy, joyful, quiet, right? And this could show up in your emotional world as low self-worth, repressing emotions, ignoring one's own emotional needs, depression, anxiety, or shunning emotional closeness or intimacy. Interesting how emotional neglect has the coping mechanisms of emotional suppression. Like it really is like a one to one almost every single time. It's because yeah, like if nobody showed you if in your at home world, nobody gave a shit about your emotional world, right? You're gonna be like, oh, well, I'm actually just a fucking weirdo and I should keep everything to myself forever because when I try to express myself, everyone either ignores me or makes me feel bad about it. So I'm never gonna share this with anybody ever again. Right? And then you get older and you try to be in a relationship with somebody who does find your emotional world fascinating, but that distrust and that unsafety, is the right word? That scared feeling and that unsafe feeling you had when you were a kid still shows up like, well, I can't trust you because everyone else I've ever met has been this way. Like, you can't be different than that, right? Even though we're adults and even though we understand context and nuance, right? Like if we never look at this, that same programming just keeps replaying over and over and over again. And that's where self-sabotage comes into play, right? The shunning emotional closeness or intimacy. You're like, I don't cry. I'm not a crier. I don't get mad. I'm just stoic. Like you're so repressed that you just turn into a brick, which that's not being alive. Being alive is not being a brick. If you're a brick, if you're a stone cold wall, something's wrong. Yeah. And honestly, even if you wear that as a badge of armor, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you on that. Like, because what's the point of being here and being alive if not to express, if not to create, if not to love, if not to be yourself? You owe it to the world to be yourself. You're a 101, baby. And to take that away, how dare you? Yeah, so that's emotional neglect. The next way that children can feel unsafe is, you guessed it, psychological neglect. It said this kind of neglect occurred when the child's caregivers failed to listen, nurture, and embrace the beautiful human beings that they are. This form of neglect includes any and all the following: name calling, insults, ridicule, yelling, gaslighting, a lack of privacy, and making overt threats. So this is interesting. It doesn't oh, here we go. Sorry. I skipped ahead. Oops, sorry. So psychological neglect, name calling, mm, mm, insults. Why the hell is your parent insulting you? Like, make it make sense. You're a literal child. And you know what? They're acting like one too. That is a classic sign that their inner child is wounded as well. But they're the adult, right? It's not your, like, you don't know any better. They're supposed to. Ridicule, yelling, gaslighting, lack of privacy, making overt threats. These are all things that you're going to find in a narcissistic parent, in a parent with borderline personality disorder. You're going to find these in parents whom are deeply codependent, enmeshed, right? Even your parent who like isn't a yeller and they don't call you names, but they don't respect your boundaries or your privacy. Like, let me think of an example. Like your mom walking in on you and your girlfriend having sex. Yeah, that's psychological neglect. I wouldn't know from experience. Bro, like, it's like, I feel like this is like the most nefarious kind of neglect because, and specifically for me, I find it's even scarier when it comes from women because a lot of times, and this is a generalization, don't come for me, but the neglect from like the dad or the more like masculine parent figure, I feel like it's more overt. Like my dad was he was like very overt with his like, cursing, his insults, his name calling, his emotional kind of abuse. But he wasn't a gaslighter. He was a yeller. I think a lot of us can relate to the yelling part, just being yelled at for no goddamn reason. But it was overt. Like I guess it's making overt threats. So maybe I was psychologically neglected more so than I was emotionally neglected. Because from my experience, my parents were very involved in my my mom was in my emotional world and cared for me physically, but it's the yelling and the insults and the overt threats. I think that came from my dad. The yelling. Oh, yelling is so freaky deaky. I don't like that. I don't even like yelling like across the house just to get my roommate's attention. I will literally get up from where I'm going and like go whisper at her from her doorway, you know? Um, yeah, but like it's the psychological neglect is more nefarious because it like, especially coming from women, because I feel like it's more covert. Like that's when we get into like the insults, like the backhanded compliments, the gaslighting. That never happened. That never happened. Like, for instance, you know, if something had happened to you, you know, with another like if sexual abuse happened to you by another family member and you had the courage to come to a different family member and they say they would never do that, right? Like you're not believed. Um, yeah, it's like more nefarious, it's more covert. I feel like it kind of sneaks in there and you don't realize that it's causing the wound that it is. But in all those situations, you felt unsafe, right? And if you felt unsafe, there's room for a wound to happen there. And it goes on to say that the symptoms that occur when the inner child endures this type of neglect and inhabit adults. Whoa, whoa. Let me back it up. The symptoms that occur when the inner child endures these types of neglect can look like this: deep-seated feelings of anger, an inability to love themselves, the development of low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is like a through line for all of these. Addictions, neurosis, aka, control freak, psychological illnesses, physical illnesses, showing a lack of respect for others, problems with sustaining a healthy relationship. Those are symptoms from psychological neglect, which I would say psychological neglect has very similar symptoms as the other two combined. So maybe that's like, that's not the worst one, but like they're all pretty bad. So that's kind of how the wounds happen, right? Emotional neglect, physical neglect, psychological neglect. Literally, anytime a child feels unsafe, there is opportunity for a wound to occur that can be embedded in the psyche of the kid and then the teenager and into adulthood forever if gone unchecked. This is the part that I'm just like, all of us have something, right? Because our parents are not perfect. And if you don't have any of these, congratulations, because you've won the goddamn lottery, bro. And who are you? Please email the show at perfectionunfoldingpod@gmail.com because I want to hear from you. I want to hear what it's like to like have a childhood where you were emotionally safe and physically safe and psychologically safe. Because even though I had one parent who had all those things, I still had another parent who, didn't, right? Not a bad person, overarchingly. Not the best parent to young children. Ew, the truth hurts. Love you, Dad. Okay. So that's how the wounds can be formed. Let's get into how those wounds show up in our adult life. Deep dive version. Okay. And I found this article on lumohealth.care. There's a blog called 7 Signs That Your Inner Child Needs Healing. Okay. So we talked about kind of like what a little bit in each of those neglect sections of what that could look like showing up. But this kind of goes into more broad terms. So if none of those specific things jumped out at you, I'm not trying to convince you that you have trauma. Like, please let me make that very clear. I'm realizing all the things I'm saying right now. I'm like, I am not trying to convince you that you have trauma. I'm simply trying to provide the context of like situations that could maybe one thing doesn't catch your ear, but maybe another thing does. And you're like, oh shit, maybe this makes sense of why I do this. And I just want you to be empowered with the knowledge that you don't have to keep doing these things and coping in these ways that are hurting you as an adult. I want to empower you to be able to recognize it because awareness is step 1, to then take steps to heal it, to then live a happy, creative, curious, playful life filled with joy and happiness, where you relate securely and you live securely and you feel safe no matter who and what you're around. That's my goal. So with that said, 7 signs your inner child needs healing. Number 1, having big feelings about small things. I think all of us can think back to a time where we had big feelings about something that didn't really elicit that reaction. A lot of people call this like when you're triggered, right? You have big feelings about something small, like you interpreted something one way when the reality of it was another way, or the intention of it was another way. A good example I have for this is like anytime anytime some of y'all are going to relate to this. A lot of people can relate to this. I mean, I do. So anytime I'm excited about something, if I'm met with, and this is still happening, like I've healed a bunch of this, but it still happens a little bit. And it's the way that I deal with it that's changed, right? That's healthier. The way I used to deal with it was like I'd crash out. But anytime somebody reacts to something that I'm excited about with anything less than excitement, I have a big feeling, I have a triggered feeling that they think the idea is stupid, right? Because I have an inner child wound of feeling stupid because that was like my ideas were dismissed a lot. My like bigness, my excitement was, I was told to reel it in because I was obnoxious and I was loud and I was this boisterous, excited little kid. And a lot of times that was really inconvenient for adults. So when an adult's inconvenienced, they do everything in their power to get the kid to sit down and shut up. This came from teachers, my parents, like just kind of all around. Now, being inconvenienced is really annoying, but is it worth crushing a child's self-esteem over? To that I say no. But that's me. So that is like a big feeling to a small thing. Like this person, as an adult, I could have this idea that I'm really excited about, but because I still have a tinge of insecurity around the way that I think and the way that I express myself around certain people, I'm always trying to feel people out to see if they're safe or not. But if I feel safe with you and I'm excited about this thing, and I know that you're a safe person, even though you're literally just expressing, like, maybe you ask a clarifying question, like I'll have this idea of like, what if we did this and this and this, right? And the clarifying question is coming from like a practical person whom I know is a safe person, and they're just trying to get clarity on what I'm talking about. Instead of me being an adult and like understanding that they're just asking a clarifying question, the little version of me comes online, feels targeted, and is like, they think you're stupid, and they're trying to tell you that you're dumb and you need to fight back and you need to defend yourself, right? Whoa. Whoa. That's a big reaction. That's a big feeling to a small thing, right? I could have just been like, yeah, you make a really good point, right? If I was just secure, if Big Me was online and I was just secure in the fact that I was excited about this thing, I would have the capacity to engage in the dialogue with them to answer their questions, which 9 times out of 10, I am as an adult. But every once in a while, that big feeling will come up and I'm like, whoa. And so now instead of reacting like, well, what do you mean? Like, oh, you think I'm stupid? Right? Which is something I would have done when I was a kid. Now I'm like, oh shit. Like I will feel the feeling in my body. And at this point, I've gotten so good at self-soothing, which is a skill you don't have when you feel unsafe as a kid. You have to develop that as an adult. Now I have that whole experience inside my body and I just respond to them and engage in conversation. And sometimes if it's a really big feeling that I can't like self-soothe quickly, I have to be like, yo, I don't know why, but I just like my body just reacted to that question in like a really odd way. Nothing to do with you. But like I'm like that like triggered something in me that probably was like really, really old. And like part of me while I like go figure this out for a sec, you know? It says under having big feelings about small things, it says one way is to look for clues in your reactions to situations, especially if certain reactions seem, quote, over the top or, quote, out of proportion. For instance, if you feel very angry when a friend looks at their phone while you are talking to them, it might be a signpost that some of your needs for attention went unmet as a child. Like if somebody's not giving you full like eye contact and like attention undivided. Honestly, I have that wound. Like I will just stop talking if you're looking at your phone, and I'll wait for you to be done, because it doesn't feel good to be ignored. And that whole like looking at your phone while I'm talking to you mimics that feeling of when you're a kid and your parents are ignoring you, or like your idea has been shut down and you know what I mean? It's like it mimics. There's so many like things that mimic these old wounds. That's why we get triggered so easily. And then it says the mental, emotional, and relational issues that we face in our daily life can often be signposts of past pains, both remembered and forgotten. Major key. We can simply search for clues in our psychological, quote, bruises, which might include having strong responses to seemingly trivial situations. Can you think of any time you've had a strong response to a seemingly trivial situation? I can. I have many. Less so recently, but like growing up for sure, like so many things triggered me. And it's probably because I have this like unmet need for attention. I mean, I went so far as to pursue singing, dancing, and acting in high school and junior high. I forced people to watch me on stage and to clap for me because I'm crazy. So maybe you can relate to this. Number 2, it says self-sabotaging behaviors. Oh my God, my favorite topic. I just love to point out the way people self-sabotage. Do I like it when people point it out on me? No. I'll point it out my damn self. Thank you very much. I used to self-sabotage a lot with food, which was hence the binge and restrict eating. It says under self-sabotaging behaviors, sometimes this can be a sign that while adult you is ready for a career advancement or a serious relationship, the younger part of you is deeply scared and anxious about it. I don't have any experience with this. Sending love to all the people who can relate to that. Yeah. It says you in doing this behavior, you are continuing to fear and avoid dangers that, although once real, have not been real for a long time. And honestly, being afraid of things that aren't real, like that feel real but haven't been real for a long time, that's all of these things. That's the epitome of having a wounded inner child, is that you're using these coping mechanisms for situations that haven't been reality for years, decades. It worked for the time that you needed it to protect yourself because you felt unsafe, but you've since moved on from that situation, and that unsafe environment hasn't been at play for a long time, and yet here you are still using these coping mechanisms. That's not helpful. And that's what it's speaking to, self-sabotaging behaviors. How have you self-sabotaged? What have you in your life been deeply afraid and anxious about because you are perceiving it in a way that was at play when you were younger? Doesn't it make sense? Yeah. Sometimes this can be a sign that while your adult self is ready, the younger part of you is deeply scared and anxious about it. How many relationships have ended because of this? Because two people were meant to be together, but the one person was just scared. I'm not thinking about anyone in particular, don't worry. Yeah, we do this all the time. I mean, I self-sabotage with food. Right now I'm in the middle of like building my business in silence. And there's little things that I keep finding myself doing to kind of sabotage it a little bit. Like with this podcast, the days that I don't record when I know I'm supposed to, that's sabotage. Why am I keeping myself from the thing that I want to do the most? And it's because little me in some way, shape, or form still has low self-esteem and thinks that she's not capable of holding the success that I'm after. Adult me is more than ready, but little me, she's scared of fumbling the ball. She was made to feel like she was stupid when she was younger because she never shut up. And also, since when does being chatty mean that you're stupid? I really do send love to all the Gen Xers who told me who thought I was an idiot because I talk too much, aka my teachers, aka Miss Williamson. I wish you well. Anyway, number 3, unhealthy coping mechanisms. A coping mechanism is anything we do to manage difficult or painful emotions. Um, Sometimes people with childhood wounds will develop unhealthier coping skills like drug use, drinking, or dissociating from reality through excess gaming and social media. They might also throw themselves into a constant whirlwind of busyness as a way of avoiding their feelings. It says emotional regulation skills were never modeled to you by your parents, i.e., processing emotions and self soothing. Yeah, unhealthy coping mechanisms. That's what I've been speaking about this whole entire time. Um, yeah, this is talking about a lot of the physical ones, the emotional eating, the gaming, the dissociation, the drinking, like anything to keep you from feeling your feelings because those feelings hurt. They're hard. These people, like, if you have any of these coping mechanisms, it's because you don't know how to process your emotions. All my potheads out there, does it really relax you or does it keep you from thinking about things? I'm not a pothead hater. Don't get me wrong. A lot of my favorite people are potheads. Okay. But only you know when you're doing it in a way that's unhealthy for you. Like, intention is everything. Are you smoking weed to avoid your feelings? Or are you smoking weed because you're just having a good time kicking back with the bros or the girls, you know? Only you know the difference. And let's be honest with ourselves, because healing only happens when we're honest with ourselves, radically honest with ourselves, right? If we can't call us out, then who can? If you can't call yourself out, you don't have the space to call yourself out, no one else is going to be able to either. And then you're stuck forever. You have to at least be able to call yourself out so that then you can, be humble enough to let others call you out when they see you hurting yourself, right? Because these unhelpful coping mechanisms, that's what you're doing. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting you and little you. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Right. And also keeps you from living your best, most creative, curious, playful, joyful life. You're just keeping yourself in this endless infinity loop where you're thinking about the same things and doing the same things and you're never making any progress. And then you wonder why you're so miserable all the time. I'm saying this to you because literally me. My unhealthy coping mechanism was food and sugar. I just ate my way to depression. And then I would be like so confused as to why I was so depressed. Like, oh, I don't know. Maybe because you're treating yourself like shit. Maybe that's it. Number 4, a difficult relationship with your family. This might be a sign that you have a childhood wound. It says this could include family tensions, feeling rejected, feeling criticized, feeling like an outcast, or a strong emotional dependency between you and a parent. Enmeshment. Ugh, scary. Enmeshment's scary because, like, it's the most covert kind of dysfunctional relationship. Like, you don't realize that it's, like, not healthy until somebody points it out and you're like, no, that's not, oh, man, maybe that is, right? It says, so if you feel ignored, scapegoated, or emotionally abandoned by your family, pay attention to this. Your younger self might be trying to tell you something. Yeah, again, not just because you have a difficult relationship with your family doesn't necessarily mean you have a wound. Like, maybe you're just different. But my guess is there's probably something there. Like, if you weren't fully accepted in your family, probably emotional neglect happening. Maybe if some psychological neglect, like there's a wound there. Like, if you're being blamed for things like that you didn't do, that's gaslighting. That's psychological neglect. And I'm not somebody who wants to sit here and put a label on everything, but these words and terms are helpful in identifying what is going on inside of you, okay? You don't have to hold on to these. You don't have to, like, use it as a label to identify yourself. I'm psychologically neglected. It's like, no. The whole goal is to heal so that you're not like that forever, right? But this terminology, these phrases, like this language is here to help you identify, like, where your wounds came from so you know where to start, okay? Number 5, self-criticism and low self-esteem. It says if you have an inner critic who is always finding fault with you and invalidating your emotions, this could be due to having overly critical or demanding adults around you as a child. The parentified children, raise your hands in the air like you just don't care. It says what happened is that your younger self, quote, internalized this critical adult voice so that in adulthood, it became part of your own thoughts and worldview. Yet it is important to remember that the inner critic's opinions are not necessarily true. They are much more likely to be old pieces of programming that you can learn to release, finally setting you and your inner child free. Who's got an inner critic who won't shut the fuck up? Just kidding. Mine's not there really anymore. Like my inner critic now, like the way I like to describe it is like your inner critic, when you're healthy, isn't a critic at all. They're really your bestie. And they're the part of you that has taste. Like your inner critic isn't supposed to be this, you're like your villain, your number one freaking op, okay? It is right now when you're unhealed. But when you're healed, it's just your inner voice. It's your once you're tapped in and you've done the work and like you love yourself, you don't have an inner critic anymore. You have a higher self. You're tapped into your higher self and your intuition. The voice that tells you, you know you're not supposed to be doing that. Or, yes, girl, fucking go for it, you know? That's the voice I have inside my head. And every once in a while, in the faint distance, the faintest of distance, if I think about it too long before correcting it, the inner critic will show up and be like, you don't really think you can do that, do you? You know you're gonna fumble that ball. And I'm like, ooh, you bitch. Like, now I'm fired up just to prove you wrong, you little hoe. That's how I deal with my inner critic now. Whereas in the past, the inner critic was the only voice in this head. And honestly, in my experience, my inner critic, it never showed up really as a voice, but it definitely showed up in my choices, right? And my choices were sabotage, just all self-sabotage. I didn't really have my inner critic. Every once in a while, when I'm starting something new, this is when my inner critic shows up. I'm lying to you because I do have an inner critic. My inner critic shows up when I start new things. I feel like all of us can relate to that. Anytime we start a new thing, if we're not exactly exceptionally perfect at it, might as well give up. You're the worst. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. Give up. You're never going to get this right. And I'm like, but now that I'm an adult and I like have skills, right, and tools that I've developed, I have this tool of asking questions. I'm like, well, who said that? Who said that? Who said that I'm going to be bad at this? I'm never going to be good at it. Also, who said I need to be good at things? Why can't I just enjoy it and call it a day? And that just shuts that inner critic down. She's like, well, I have no more power here. Like, damn it, you know? Yeah, that inner critic, what a bitch. I feel like a lot of us have an inner critic. And like the people, like it talks about in here, adults who are demanding and overly critical of you. Like this, I feel like happens with a lot of people whose parents were doctors or lawyers, and they want their kids to go to Ivy League, and like they put their kids in all these things. There's so much pressure, right? And that it begets that perfectionist mentality. My mom was so like, you're doing your best and that's amazing, sweetie. And so was my dad. So like, I don't even know where my inner critic came from and my perfectionism. Like it had to come from an external source, but I can't quite pinpoint that. But yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist, hence perfection unfolding. Like, it was when I realized I am perfect. But like, I can only get to that and appreciate it if I deprogram myself. Versus the opposite of like perfection is never going to be attained. It's something I'm always going to be reaching for. It's like, no, the second you relax and just appreciate everything you are, like that's perfect, yeah. So if you have a inner critic, likely got a wound there, because how you gonna tell a child that they're not enough? Like that's honestly crazy. That's honestly crazy. Like I wish you healing. Number 6, relationship issues. You might have a wounded child if you have relationship issues. It says, if you find that you are in a pattern of unhealthy, unhappy, or abusive relationships, or are always chasing unavailable people, guilty, then your inner child might be deeply wounded in their ability to connect healthily with others. I'll be the first one to tell you, I've always chased unavailable people. And when I realized that the core wound of that was that I don't feel worthy of the love that I so seek, that blew my freaking mind. And that's the part I want to make clear to you guys. It's not always so obvious. Like, if you were to ask me, do you have low self-esteem? I would be like, no, abso-fucking-lutely not. And, I'm cursing for emphasis, right? But the reality of it is that I didn't have low self-esteem in my professional life or my friendship life or my family life or with myself life. But the second a straight man I was attracted to walks in the door, where does it go? Where does the self-esteem go? Because now I'm seeking validation from this man I don't know. And when I realized that multiple things could be true at one time, I said, "Oh God, gosh darn it, I've got a problem. I might have a wound there." And you know where that comes from? My dad. Put me in the statistic with daddy issues. Put me in the group with daddy issues. Hot girls have daddy issues. And that's just the truth. So yeah, when I put all that together, I was like, oh, this is where I need to start. And then I read all the books and listened to all the podcasts, and I was like, I'm going to figure this out. And in a lot of ways I have. And in a lot of ways, I'm always going to have that wound, but now I have tools and knowledge and awareness moving forward. So it's never going to be the same thing. Like my next relationship, I learned a lot from this last relationship, but my next relationship will be better because I will be more secure with myself in relationship with a straight man that I'm attracted to. I'm not going to be seeking their validation because I'm not attracted to you if you're not giving me the validation and love and respect that I give myself. In the past, I was attracted to that, and that's the unfortunate part. But we've lived, we've learned. Now I'm sharing with you. Love that for both of us. Okay. Yes. Yeah, and if you're in abusive relationships and you continue doing that, your inner child is definitely wounded. Yeah. And that goes back to that low self-esteem thing. Because when you have low self-esteem, even if you're not aware of it, you do not treat yourself well, and therefore you let other people treat you unwell as well. Oh my God, what the hell am I saying? You get what I'm trying to say. Number 7, and I have to pee so bad, so I'm gonna jump through this. I did not know how much water I had before this. Oh my God. Okay, number 7, it says you might have a childhood wound if you have mental, physical, or emotional issues. It says people with wounded inner children can often experience persistent and chronic feelings of emptiness. I've experienced that. Helplessness and hopelessness. They might feel that they are existing as a false self and that their life lacks a sense of aliveness or spontaneity. Remember earlier when they said you weren't allowed to be spontaneous? When you were shut down anytime you had an emotional feeling? Correlation here? It says they might also feel deeply disconnected from others. It says mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, addiction, eating disorders, and CPTSD can also be present. Plus, physical conditions like migraines, chronic fatigue syndrome, and fibromyalgia have also been linked to childhood trauma. Notice how migraines, chronic fatigue, and fibromyalgia, those are all, what are they called? What is that category of sickness called? I don't know, but they're all sicknesses that don't have cures. Nobody knows where they come from, right? But I've been doing research, and I don't have the things to quote you right now. But let me tell you something. What the freak is it called? When you're probably screaming at the whatever you're listening to this on, and you're like, it's this. I said this to my ex once because they had alopecia, and I was like, every single sickness that is like fibromyalgia or that is oh my God. It's the sickness where your body starts to attack itself. All of those are caused from childhood trauma or emotionally suppressed trauma. It's when you suppress your experience and your emotions and they get trapped in your body and then your body tries to kill itself. Yeah. Immunocompromised? I don't know. I can't remember, but anyway. Yes, mental, physical, emotional issues. If you have any of these things, I can 99.99999%, I would guess that you have a childhood wound, an inner child wound. Fight me on it. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So those are some things of ways in like you might be able to recognize in your adult life, like, oh, like, yeah, I deal with this. It's hard for I have really toxic relationships, or yeah, I've got all those things. I've got physical, mental, and psycho, like, and emotional problems that make me feel like I have no purpose and I dissociate all the time. Like, definitely a deep seated wound in there somewhere, and like, journal about it. Like, ask yourself, like, where does this come from? How old is this feeling? Um, how old was I the first time I remember experiencing this? Or, just awareness is step one, and then you can inquire. And then once you inquire, you can hold space and maybe express all those emotions that are trapped, because that's the thing. Those emotions are trapped. And until you express them, until you allow yourself to have all the feelings around this wound that you weren't allowed to have, or you didn't have time to have, or you weren't safe enough to have when you were a child, you get to create that container for yourself as an adult. And it's your responsibility to yourself to do that. And whether you have kids or not, in this work, you have at least one kid. And that's the kid inside of you. That's your inner child. You are the parent now. And we're going to get into reparenting next episode, but that's like, dude, the awareness is step one, because without the awareness, like, none of this work happens. And I want to just, and again, I said this last episode, but like, you have to, like, I just ask of you to give yourself some grace and some space. Like, please, if you have any ego around being wounded, quote unquote, you owe it to yourself just to explore the possibility that it's true. And know that it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you pathetic. It literally is just true, bro. Body neutrality, healing neutrality, okay? Like, if you need to adopt a healing neutrality mindset, be like, this is just what happened to me. Like, I was a kid, you know? Then do that. Like, I literally have no it's taken me a while to get here. Like, I have no problem with being like, yeah, that was my experience. Yep, I was touched when I was 3 before, and I don't have any memory of it. But I've also processed that experience with like deep guttural tears and like questions and anger and I was fucking pissed when I found out, but I was also validated in all these weird feelings that I've had my entire life of being afraid of men and all this stuff. And like, I'm not sharing that to like trauma dump with you. I'm just like, I'm sharing with you the fact that like I processed that experience, and now it doesn't have to be this thing that overtakes my life. Like, it no longer affects the way that I relate to men. It no longer affects my relationships. I no longer binge eat to fill the gaping hole inside of myself that was there before, because I gave myself the opportunity to feel every feeling that came with that experience, an experience that I don't even have a memory of. It says this, the forgotten and the remembered wounds from childhood. There was a time when I was 3 years old, and I felt so unsafe in my body in a physical way with this person, and I I don't even remember it in my brain, my working brain, no memory, but my body kept that motherfucking score, my guy. And so I hope that you feel vulnerable enough with yourself to be able to have that conversation with yourself. And you don't owe anybody this information. This is a journey for you and you alone. Okay. But I'm telling you, once you give yourself permission to feel your feelings and to explore these things and to be able to question, well, like, I love my parents and they did their best, but like, yeah, like maybe being told to shut up affected me in a way that's kind of controlling my life as an adult. It's affecting my relationships. It made me feel bad. It's the reason why it's like maybe being yelled at when I was a kid makes me feel like I can't speak up at work. Maybe, you know, being being broke and not knowing when the lights are going to be turned off, like, has given me this deep-seated fear of anxiety where like I can't trust people. It's like, maybe, like, it doesn't even have to be true, but like, maybe. And if it is, okay, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? How does that affect my adult life? And do I want to keep that, or do I want to heal it so I can move on from that? Right? Because a lot of times these things that are happening in our lives, they're happening subconsciously and they're controlling our lives. And it's like, I don't know about you, but I'm an adult. I don't want some motherfucking wounded child like telling me what to do, because that's gonna piss me off. It's like, oh, you're scared and now I have to be scared too? No, bitch, I'm an adult and I'm gonna take care of us. We're safe now. I'm gonna make sure we're safe and that we're secure and that you're listened to and that you're heard. And that's where we're gonna get into reparenting. Love that for both of us. So okay, moving on. Again, another list of like, that's kind of how it shows up in our adulthood. And then I'm just gonna give you another like super quick list of other ways that it could show up, right? Super quick speed round. It says all those things I just mentioned, they could show up in adulthood as specific examples. Excuse me, I just burped. Pardon. It could look like this. It could look like a deep feeling that there is something wrong with you, being a people pleaser. check. Being a rebel and you only feel alive when in conflict with someone else. Ooh, that's a lot of men. Love you. Being a hoarder, holding on to things, feeling like you need to like hold on to things to feel safe. That's like a physical neglect wound for sure. Not being able to let go of possessions and people, control thing. Experience anxiety with something new. Feeling guilty for setting boundaries, guilty. Driven to be a super achiever, being rigid and perfectionist. Having problems starting and finishing tasks, ADHD, guilty. Feel ashamed at expressing emotions. It's a lot of men. It's a lot of men. Not just men, but it's a lot of men. Ashamed of your body, a lot of women. A lot of women. Having a deep distrust of anyone else, avoiding conflict no matter what the cost, guilty in the past, and a fear of abandonment. So if any of these ring a bell, it's like, dude, yeah, you got to at least have a conversation with yourself. That's the least. That's the least we can do for ourselves. With love, no judgment, like love. Like none of this stuff is easy or fun to talk about. That's why we avoid it our entire lives. And like I said last week, like it takes a lot of courage to sit with yourself and ask yourself questions that you might not like the answer to. And that's okay. And you know what? I'm like, commend you for that. Nobody said this shit was going to be easy just because it has to do with kids. Okay. Kids are really hard to deal with. So yeah, so that's the episode. That is where the wounds come from and how they can show up in our adult lives. And, yeah, let me know like which one of those resonated. Like if you are aware of those things that you have inside of you, if you weren't, if some of those surprised you, or if it's all kind of just common knowledge. I mean, none of this stuff, I'm not rewriting any of the books on this stuff. I'm just sharing with my own anecdotal advice and experience with hopes that, it gives you, the courage to do it yourself. Yeah, and I just want to end by like encouraging you to practice self-compassion and recognition. All of these things all these ways in which our inner children dealt with the wounds of feeling unsafe in childhood, those, I want to reiterate, were protection mechanisms. All those things that you learned to do were you, as a child, doing your best to protect yourself from that harm that was being inflicted upon you. None of these things mean that you're broken. You are not broken. If anything, you're resilient as fuck. And again, cursing for emphasis. That's the major key that I want you to take away from this, is that being wounded does not mean that you're this broken person. It means that you literally figured out how to survive. Because if you didn't survive, you wouldn't be here listening to this podcast. And let me guess, you're probably listening to this podcast and you've probably had some successful relationships and you probably have a job and a place to live and a car and you've accomplished all of these wonderful, cool things. You probably have hobbies and rich friendships and a beautiful network of people, and still can struggle with the coping mechanisms you developed as a child because you felt unsafe in one way, shape, or form. These are protective mechanisms. They do not mean that you're broken. So please practice self-compassion. And please know that this is not a one and done kind of thing. This is not like you sit down one day, you talk about all your things, and then you're healed. No, I will never preach that. And if that's ever what you get from the way I speak or what, please email the pod at perfectionunfoldingpod@gmail.com, because that is not my intention and we need to have a conversation. So yes, practice self-compassion. You were protecting yourself. You were not broken. This is literally it just is like, and it's okay. And if you don't have any of these wounds and you're listening just so you could help somebody else, like, I'm, I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you. Thank you on behalf of any person you share this with. Thank you on behalf of like all your friends, because you're a good person, you know? So that is today's episode. Next week, we're going to get into what it looks like to heal your inner child, aka through reparenting your inner child. So buckle up for that, because that means we got to put in some more work. Don't you love it here? And again, all of this inner child work is here to remind you. Sorry, let me backtrack. I am sharing all this inner child work information with you so that you can heal it to live a happier, healthier, wealthier, joyous, curious, creative life. That is the reason why we do any quote unquote work at all, is with that as the goal. That is the North Star. The goal is not to get so enmeshed in the terminology and the labeling and the goal is to collect the tools, like get the awareness, collect the tools, implement them, practice, heal, live your best life. That's at least my methodology. And if that resonates with you, I hope you take that and you run with it, because you deserve to live that kind of life. Like I don't even want to use the word deserve. That life is yours. That is your perfection unfolding. And it will continue unfolding so long as you continue to pursue it. Yeah. I love you guys so much. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for this topic. I'm grateful for the work. I'm grateful for little me and little you. And I'm grateful for every single person I encounter who allows me to interact with the joyous part of their being and the little kid that's inside of them. And yeah, let me know you know what? How about this? Let me know what your favorite part of the episode was, and or what you want to learn about next, or what you want me to get into in the reparenting episode, what questions you have. And then also, if you have like, if there's a quality about your inner child that you love the most, like even if you haven't done this like work of looking into your, wounds and stuff, what is like your favorite part about yourself? And can you pinpoint that to your childhood? I would love to know that too. If you want to email the pod, email me at perfectionunfoldingpod@gmail.com. I hope that you like this video. I hope you share it with a friend who you think could really benefit from it. Yeah, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, rate and review the podcast. I could use all the help I can get. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, there's not a lot of viewership on this, and I'm doing my best. So, anyway, that has been another episode. I will talk to you guys next week. I love you so much. Okay, bye.